Welcome to the Alchemy of Success podcast with Dr. Michael Leslie, PhD, designed to inspire, educate, and empower listeners to embrace a life of abundance in all areas: mind, body, spirit, relationships, and finances. Let's get started.
Good evening and welcome to the Alchemy of Success. I'm your host, Dr. Michael Leslie. It's a pleasure to be here with you for our fourth podcast, and thank you again for coming tonight. The guest I have tonight is a very special guest. She is Shawn Bearman. She is a master coach and multi-entrepreneur. And the Shawn, we're glad to have you here, and welcome to the show.
I can see I have to shorten my bio a lot.
Well, we wanted to have people have a real idea of who they're in the presence of tonight. So I decided I wanted to include all of it.
Yeah, it's great. It's really great. Awesome.
All
So
right.
we could do a number of different things, Dr. Michael, but one of the things that I have often been accused of is doing what I call fire hosing, right? Which is to give so much information that people could barely take it all in at once. It's like gushing, right? And that's one of the reasons why I love the platform that you're on and that you're live streaming to YouTube, because people are going to be able to go back and they're going to be able to review and they're going to be able to pull out all the juicy tidbits, you know? And so thank you. Thanks for putting it someplace where people are going to have access to it over and over and over again because they're going to want it.
Well, you're welcome. And I'm. This is a work in progress, and I'm glad to hear that someone who has the amount of experience that you have doing these kinds of things thinks I'm moving in the right direction and doing the right thing. So thanks again. All right. So I want to start off by asking you about the part of this that in your bio that I really appealed to me and wanted to get started talking with you about is this idea of doing things outside of the box. So, the reason I wanted you to talk about it and start there is because I don't even think that most people realize that they're in a box, right? So
Well,
let's talk about what it means to be in a box and what might
very,
doing things outside of the box might be.
very good. So here's a history lesson for those of you who don't know. Our entire education system in the United States and Canada, okay, was set up to teach people how to be better factory workers, okay? Because our education system wasn't set up until the Industrial Revolution when we needed to train people to work in the factories. So our education system was not set up to empower and encourage you to think outside the box. That's not how it was set up. Now, some people, they did it anyway because they just couldn't help themselves, right? They're outside the box thinkers, right? They're rebels. We all went to school with some of these rebels, okay? Some of us might have even been some of these rebels, right? Okay. And it's funny because when I was in school, I didn't use school for school. I used school for networking. Okay. Because what they were teaching me was very, very basic, right? That's what they teach us in school, right? 2 and 2 are 4, how to do basic stuff. So it's important to remember where we came from and why we educate ourselves and how we got trained to be inside the box. Now, there are some really great schools these days that aren't following that traditional pathway. There's some charter schools that are really great. There's, outside the box schools now, which is fantastic. It only took a couple hundred years, but that's good, right? At least we have something now. But if you don't think outside of the box sometimes, when breakdowns happen, now what's a breakdown? A breakdown is an unforeseen circumstance, something you couldn't have planned for necessarily. Okay. If something regularly happens and it is unworkable, that's not a breakdown because it's regular. A breakdown is something you couldn't have necessarily prepared for. Okay. So when breakdowns happen, if you can't think outside the box, then you're constantly going to be trying to apply the same solution to different problems. And we all know that will stop being effective at some point.
Because I think it might be beneficial to all of us to go a little deeper in this concept. So you mentioned the function of schools during the industrial age, and still today, unfortunately, in many schools, is to
Right?
train people for work, for factory work, or for some kind of work and now what we call it in the corporate setting, but
Yeah.
basically to do things
Call it
in
speed.
alignment with other people's objectives. So here's the piece that I would like you to elucidate, and it's tied to one of the questions that's already come into our network here for you, and that is, when we say, let's assume that we understand that the places in which we've been doing our thinking in the past and the ways we've thought about them in the past has been inside the box. What does it mean to go outside the box? What's the method that you use for getting yourself out of the pattern of thinking that you've always known, that you've always been taught, that everyone else thinks is the way to think about things? What's the strategy for doing that, for exiting, for escaping the box?
So there's two different strategies that are really easy and really fast. The first strategy, all right, is to literally get and repeat over and over to yourself, like an affirmation, that I'm not supposed to have the answer. The answer's not supposed to come from over here. So what does that mean? And what does that kind of force us to do?
Someone else, or you'd have to ask, well, let's say you'd have to ask, where would the answer come from if it's not going to come from where I am?
Right. Very good. So at the very least, it would have you start looking outside the personal barrier, right? And on to another level of interaction that you have with people. It forces you to go outside of your head and to someone else, because you can't go to work on anything that stays in your head. Okay. So that's the first inquiry to get into, to move yourself outside of your box. Okay. And the second one is even more fun and even easier. Repeat after me. The answer to every problem
The answer to every problem
is brainstorming.
is brainstorming.
It doesn't matter what the problem is. And brainstorming cannot happen as effectively on your own as it does with other people. In fact, when I brainstorm, I automatically assume that they're going to have a better answer for whatever the issue is than I am. Because even someone like me, who's very skilled at being outside the box, okay, is going to get stuck in a rut in a box on whatever the issue might be occasionally.
Okay, now that's clear. Now the follow-on question to that would be, some of us would assume, maybe most people would assume, that the people that they're talking to, that they're brainstorming with, are also products of living inside the box. So we would tend to devalue what it is that whatever took place in the brainstorming session, the questions that we would ask, it would be like, well, I already know that. They've said, I've heard that before. And most likely we would have heard it before because we were all trained within the same system. So
Yeah. It's,
what's your
that's not,
answer to that?
it's not an accurate assumption. Okay. Because our box is very personal to us. Somebody can't stand in our box and look at things the way we do. Okay. And the whole point of brainstorming is that there is no bad ideas. So if you're brainstorming with people who are interrupting like that, then you're not brainstorming and you're not doing it with the right people or with someone who's actually trained to brainstorm. There's a way of brainstorming that works.
Well,
Okay. And there's a
that's
few
helpful.
rules to it, right?
No, that's helpful, Shawn. So
Yeah.
let's talk about the way of brainstorming that works for creating access to ideas or solutions that we would not have had access to before.
Great. And there's even a couple of places where you can do this these days that are really, really powerful. And I'll share those as well. Okay. The best way to brainstorm, if you've never done it before, okay, is to find someone who has done it that's willing to facilitate for you. Okay. And then you invite either onto a Zoom or over to your house. I love doing them in person too. You invite 4 or 5 people from different backgrounds, different diversity, different employment, like with different points of view, right? I always invite the most creative people I've run into lately, right? And you sit around and everybody brings something to the table to brainstorm about. Everybody brings either something that they'd like to see move forward faster, or something that's not working for them, or something that they need ideas around, right? So everybody gets their chance to have the ideas thrown up for them. Okay. Now, sometimes if what I'm brainstorming is a really big deal, like I'm brainstorming launching a company or I'm brainstorming blah, 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 then I'll just invite the greatest thinkers I know and ply them with lots of food and drink. And they give me all the ideas I need to move forward with that thing. No problem. But I love it when there are people from various different backgrounds because I get the ideas from the least likely people, really. Because you don't know what kind of whole life that person has had. You only know what you've seen of them so far. You don't know the wealth of experience and knowledge and little pieces of tidbits of things they were told by their great grandfather before their great grandfather died. Like, you don't know all that stuff. So they bring, every human brings something to the table that's extraordinary. And I did this once with this group of people, and one of the people that arrived, I was facilitating. Okay. So it wasn't my brainstorm. I was facilitating the brainstorm. And one of the people that arrived was my bully from high school. Okay. Now you can just imagine, right? It's like, I've got to deal with my own personal feelings. I got to look and see, am I incomplete about anything? Right. There's all this stuff for me to manage and still be great and think that every idea that came out of her mouth was awesome. Because we have to make every idea that comes out right. We may not use that idea, but we make all the ideas right. In other words, the person that we're brainstorming for doesn't get to speak during the brainstorm. They don't get to have an opinion on any of it. Someone else is capturing for them, right? We're usually recording it, and they're just there to listen. That's it. When it's somebody else's turn, then they can talk and they can give ideas. But on their own, they're not allowed to talk.
Got it.
Because that will always cause problems.
Yeah, I would imagine. Yeah, but how about? And if,
Yeah,
what
and
if? And
if they're really, really smart, they'll take that list of ideas and they'll take it to their coach, like me, and they'll say, here's the list of brainstorming ideas. Let's go through it. If they're really smart. Right?
let's take a minute. Some of our viewers, listeners have joined us since we started, so I wanted to bring them up to date, and especially I wanted to provide a little summary for some of our listeners and speakers who are here in Spanish. So, hemos estado hablando de cómo la lluvia de ideas puede ser útil para resolver problemas que nosotros no podemos resolver nosotros mismos solos. Y que en esa lluvia de ideas no hay que hacer una crítica, ninguna crítica de lo que sale de las ideas de otros, sino de recopilar esas ideas y luego utilizarlos nosotros, ver si nos convienen en los proyectos, discutir esas lluvias con otras personas con quienes estamos colaborando y ver si alguna de esas ideas es de útil para nosotros. El segundo concepto que ha dado la Shawn Bearman es de que nosotros no podemos tener acceso a las soluciones a nuestros problemas nosotros mismos, porque estamos limitados por nuestras percepciones, la manera en que nos fuimos educados, la cultura en que vivimos. Entonces, es una idea radical, ¿verdad? Decir, yo no puedo resolver el problema, pero con las ideas de otras personas puedo tener acceso a soluciones que yo no habría pensado yo individualmente. So we've been speaking to Shawn Bearman about brainstorming and what that process actually looks like. I have to say, Shawn, that it doesn't look anything like what I thought brainstorming was. So I'm really glad to hear this take on what can be possible, what is possible if we take our limitations, if you would, or the problems we're working on, and include other people, let them participate in how we might deal with them rather than trying to figure it out for all by ourselves. There's another piece of this that you use and I mentioned it in your bio, and we can return to the brainstorming piece a bit again in case you want to flesh it out a little bit more for our viewers and listeners. But there's something you mentioned in your bio called creativity. And creativity as a concept, as a word, gets thrown around a lot, right? We need to be more creative, right? And so I want to know what creativity means to you, and how, I think you've already outlined how brainstorming might enhance creativity, but I'd like to take the concept, if you would take the concept apart and tell us what it means to you to be creative.
This might be sending it down a weird path, but I'm going to tell you the number one way for me that it means to be creative is creativity is giving up that there's anything wrong. Right? It's like ensuring that you have a clear space to cause things in. Because if you're making what's currently happening wrong, you can't tap into the creative juices. Right? The brain is already taken up trying to defend, deflect, or deny, what I call the triple D. Right? The brain is already involved in doing that. So there's no space to create something new that's possible, a new idea, a new way of being, a new feeling about it. Does that make sense?
And that there's no space for something new to occur. I'm going to bring it down to a level which I've been having some experience with this. I think I'm working, as some of our listeners are at least. I'm working on developing a place where people like yourselves and others can come and share their ideas, teach, and help others get to where they want to go. In fact, the whole purpose of this podcast is to empower people to resolve the obstacles that they have in their way so they can get to their goal. That's what I'm up to. And I know that I'm not a master of all the answers to all the problems that people have, but I know that I call it a kind of a collective intelligence, if you would, that we can tap, and you're part of that collective intelligence that we're tapping tonight. So here's the example that what's happened to me recently as I work on the development of this. I'm calling it a show. I don't know why I'm still stuck with that word, but I like it. As I develop this opening for people to speak to others about how to get what they want in life, I noticed that I was very focused on getting it done and having it work by a certain time. And
so you had a picture in your head, right?
Sorry?
You had a picture in your head of how it should look and when it should look that way.
Yes, exactly. And that
Yep.
as I thank you, that's it. I had a something, yeah, a picture. And then I noticed that I wasn't every it kept getting bigger. There were more things to do. Every time I resolved one thing, there was something else that needed to be done. And then I realized I wasn't going to be able to get it done within the time frame that I had originally imagined. I had to let that one go. But then also something else shifted, and that was that all of a sudden I wasn't in a hurry to get it done anymore. It
Mm.
was it was more like, well, what's the rush? I mean, am I going to die tomorrow? Or if it doesn't come out next week, will I go to hell? I mean, I don't know. It was something that got left behind of the pressure I was putting on myself because I
Yeah.
thought things had to be done in a certain time period in a certain way.
It sounds to me like it became more about the journey for you than about the destination.
Hmm.
There's a lot of power that comes when we're making something about the destination, but it's not empowering for everybody. Sometimes it's more empowering to think of it as we're placed on the planet to cause and fulfill a purpose. And maybe the journey of discovering what that is the fulfillment of that.
Well, there's a lot of left brain people who would take issue with that. I mean, okay, well, this is good. That's why we're here tonight. So there's okay, here's the goal, and here are the steps to get to the goal, and then I have to do each one of these
Can't
steps,
explain everything
and
away, Michael. We can't explain it all. Not everything on this planet is explainable. See, we view things through a lot of different filters, right? Of how we were raised and our education and who we came from and how we came to be here and, like all of our experiences, right? We each have a different frame that we're viewing life through. The problem isn't with that. The problem is that we make their frame wrong. So if we can give up that there's anything wrong with that, there'll be a lot more space for creativity. There's a lot more space to have our feelings. There's a lot more space to be a response versus a reaction to what's going on around us. Mostly, people are walking around having so many disempowering conversations in their head that they have no space for anything else.
some examples of disempowering conversations.
I should be this way, they should be that way. This should any sentence with should in it. Any sentence with should. And by the way, if any of your people reach out to me, I'll give you a handout from my course that lists most of the disempowering conversations that we have. Like it's a cheat sheet of all the different kinds of disempowering conversations that we have. I'm happy to give that out. But it's any conversation that we have where we're not empowered in that conversation, that's a disempowering conversation.
Mhm, mhm. Which brings around the question about what are empowering conversations that one might have, not only about oneself, but about one's projects, about the people that one collaborates with. What are some of the kinds of empowering conversations that one might have?
We have those when we're sitting inside our authentic self. Okay. When we're sitting inside our authentic self with a big S and we're being true to ourselves and we're talking and being in communication true to ourselves and we're taking actions true to ourselves, then we're empowered and the conversations we're having in our head are empowered. I say, and like try it on, doesn't gonna fit for everybody, but I say your authentic self doesn't even have disempowering conversations. It doesn't even know what one is. When you're being your authentic self, there's no such thing as disempowering conversations in your space. So if you're not that, right? If you're having any sort of disempowering conversation, it's not your authentic self driving the car called you. If I'm having a disempowering conversation, if Shawn's having a disempowering conversation, then my identity is driving the bus called Shawn, not me.
This is fascinating. I want to again speak to the person that's here with us. Or, so Shawn is a CEO of a company that produces radical results. And the radical results come from resetting who you. I'm interpreting this, and you're going to help me with this, Shawn. But resetting who you say you are in the matter, and then taking the actions that are in alignment with that reset.
Well, let me give you a really easy formula, okay?
Yes.
The right context or goal or intention plus the right actions, which I say are efficient, effective, consistent, and sufficient, will always cause the right results. So if you don't have the right results, either the right actions are missing or the right context or goal is missing, or both. Now,
Okay.
pure coaching, okay, just so everybody's aware in the business world or in any other world, pure coaching is only asking the right questions so that whoever you're talking with, right, whoever's, getting the coaching finds the right path on their own, mostly, okay? Consulting is telling somebody what to do and expecting that they're going to do it because that's what they're paying you for, is your list of the top 20 things to do to cause X. If you're really lucky, you'll find a hybrid like me who's both, right? Who can tell you what it is that you need to do and here's 20 things, pick 5 of them, doesn't matter, they're all going to move you forward, and then help you get out of the way anything that's going to get in the way of you doing them, which is dealing with the context, right? What's in the way of me taking the actions that I said I would take? There's got to be some sort of disempowering conversation going on in there. It's either a disempowering conversation about yourself, a disempowering conversation about others, or a disempowering conversation about the way it is, like in the world. Like politically, for example, there's a lot of disempowering conversations floating around right now.
I should say to our viewers and listeners that this conversation, although I would say I'm somewhat familiar with it, I'm present to it in a totally different way tonight with Shawn. I say that because I've been taking a look at my own disempowering conversations as I began to move this project called The Alchemy of Success forward into the universe, right?
Yeah.
And
the bigger the game is that you're playing, the more of those conversations you'll have.
well, I like that. There's hope.
Yeah. If you're playing a small game, you're not going to have very many disempowering conversations.
Mm, 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 mm. Well, that's I gotta tell you, Shawn, I got a lot of relief from the thing you just said, because I am playing a larger game.
Say it a slightly different way. Are you ready? This is the way it's supposed to look when you're winning the game.
Did you hear that, everyone? This is the way it's supposed to look when I'm winning the game, when you're winning the game. This is I would call it the primo knowledge here, primo information. So this whole business of being self-critical and what is it, and critical of other people, and or just acritical. How about the people who are acritical?
Well,
Which sounds hold on, Shawn. It might sound that way to some people that you're saying, well, anything is okay. I mean, we're going to get there anyway. I'm saying this a little bit of tongue in cheek, but I know some people who really I want to know how it's going to work and when it's going to work and who's going to be involved and what I need to do right now.
There's a lot of anal people out there, and they should know all that information. It's good to know all that information, okay? But it takes work to compile all that information. And do you know that human beings are fundamentally lazy? Like, we're often unwilling to do the work required to put all the structures in place that need to be put in place. Of course you need team. team and teamwork. But you know how many people resist teams and teamwork? All they do is complain that they're always on their own and they're like some little like Lone Ranger syndrome going to happen, right? They're unwilling to have the conversations needed to create teams and teamwork. Isn't that funny? Now, it's not them. Dr. Michael, it's not them. It's their identity. Their authentic self doesn't have those conversations, remember? So I'm just going to keep reminding you of that. Only our identity has those disempowering conversations, right?
We need to do that. We need to do that now. So let's, I'm going to just take a deep, brief breath and let it go in one more. Yeah, I get a little movement here and a third. All right, so I want to take up now, Shawn, this business of identity. I think this is something new for most people, that not something that's not who we actually are is usually having a conversation with us and with the people around us, which I think you're calling our identity.
Well, it
So
depends on where you come from, like what modality of like knowledge base you come from. So if you come from a psychological modality, then you might call it the ego. Okay. So different modalities will have different words explaining some of what I'm talking about. I'm encompassing all of it under one heading that I'm calling the identity. So, Michael, give me something that when you do it, it just totally brings you joy while you're doing it. Like you're in the zone while you're doing it.
the thing I found the most fun of late and being in the zone is figuring out how to master new technology.
Great.
Um,
Awesome. That's a perfect example.
Let me close a window here. 1 second.
Okay. You go close your window because the street's getting loud where Dr. Michael
Yeah,
is.
it's a helicopter
Oh,
flying people to a medical center that's like 3 blocks away from where I live right now
oh,
in
got it.
Cartagena, and it looks like they only like to fly the patients there at night. So we get this.
You are partying and hitting poles and stuff and need to be flown to the hospital. It doesn't make sense if you think about it. All right. So
Identity,
let's talk
ego.
about the identity for a second, okay? So the different training that you may have taken in the past, like I said, will have different names or labels for what I'm talking about. Okay. But when you are like in the midst of that new technology and having fun with it and playing with it, you're in your authentic self. You're just in a joyful place. You love things, you love people, you're just having a good time, right? In the zone. You're not having disempowering thoughts necessarily, right? At all. Because you're in the zone, playing and having fun, right? There's a lot of people who play video games that say, when I'm playing a video game, I'm in the zone. I talked to one guy, he said, when I'm in the middle of the river and I cast that first fly, I'm in the zone. It's awesome. When I'm singing, I'm that way. When I'm swimming, I'm that way. So there's a few things that I do where I'm that way. When we're in the zone, we're being our authentic self, in love with life, in love with people, taking actions, right? Having fun. And then there's everything not that. And everything not that is what I call your identity. And depending on what training you've taken, they might call it something else, right? In the world of Landmark, they had a whole list of terminologies for things that your identity did, like your act and your strong suits and your point of views and all those names, right? No matter what developmental, professional or personal development you've done, they have a name for this, I guarantee you. It's when you are not empowered. I say your identity is running the show. And when your identity is running the show, it's using disempowering conversations as the tools, because that's the only tool in the toolbox of the identity. It doesn't have any other tools in there. It's the only tool there. Now, the identity only has one purpose. What do you think that purpose is? Survival. Make sure you wake up tomorrow morning. That's it. No other purpose, right? And how it knows you'll wake up is that it gathers evidence. Every time you do something and wake up tomorrow, it's more evidence that if you keep doing that thing, you'll wake up tomorrow. Now, you started doing all these new things, Dr. Michael. You're driving your identity crazy because there's all these new things and new actions that you're taking that you weren't taking before. And your identity's going, whoa, 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 buddy. I don't have any evidence that this stuff's going to turn out, right? So the identity keeps looking for strategies that it can use to slow you down. Anytime we're taking on something new and we're expanding personally or professionally faster than our identity can handle, it's going to try a few strategies to slow us the heck down.
To something too that I've noticed, and that's that when I have a lot more moments of being tired. I wouldn't call it exhaustion, but certainly rather than working, let me take a nap, and then it's like 2 hours have gone by, and it's
Right.
okay, you can get up now and do some work, but working. What is it? What do I put it before? And I'm not defending either one. I'm just sharing this with you because I'm seeing some things now with this conversation. So I instead of what my way of gets back to the core of our conversation. So my way of dealing with the identity that wants to slow me down from transforming or doing something new is it says, okay, you're going to take a nap now. So the way I get around it, I say, okay, I'm going to take a nap now. And then I get up, and instead of working from say 2 to 4, I work from 6 to 10. So I still got some work done. I let it take over for the time that it thought it needed to take over.
Okay.
Go ahead.
What's going on? Okay. There are 3 indicators, 3 red flags that tell you that your identity is trying to take over driving the car called Michael. Okay. One of them is a physical indicator. For you, it's fatigue. Like immediately you feel this wave of tiredness come over you. Okay. There's a certain percentage of the population where fatigue is our trigger. Okay. There'll be a physical thing that happens. And when you start to feel that physical thing, that tells you your identity is trying to take over driving the car called Michael. There's also, in addition to a physical indicator, there's a feeling indicator. You start to have certain feelings, right? For me, it's annoyance, right? When I start to get annoyed with people, I know my identity is trying to take over, because being annoyed with people is not a natural, automatic way of being for me. It takes a lot for me to be annoyed normally, right? So when I start to get annoyed with people, I'm like, uh-oh, I better stop the action because my identity is trying to take over driving the car called Shawn. And I've been in the middle of calls and say, hold on, I got to stop for a second, right? Because I had a disempowering thought and I don't want that getting in our way. Give me one moment. So then I deal with that. It takes me just a moment because I have a trained system for that. It takes me about, count to 10 maybe, and I'm done. And then I'm back. Okay. So because as soon as I have that feeling, I know the identity is trying to take over. The final one is a thought indicator. So you have a thought or you say something out loud that's a term or an expression that when you say it, it automatically tells you that your identity is trying to take over. What happens when there's a breakdown? What's the first thought that comes to mind, Dr. Michael?
I did something wrong.
Right. So you have this thought, I did something wrong. Immediately, as soon as you have that thought, your identity is trying to take over driving the car called Michael. My expression is, there's expression screwed. If I have a thought that I'm screwed, they're screwed, or it's screwed, or I say that out loud, or I have that thought, I know my identity is trying to take over the car called Shawn. So I just stop the action and I deal with it right then and there so that I don't tolerate it. I don't step over it, because if I do, then it gets on everything. It's kind of like oil, right? It kind of gets on everything and then you can't get it off.
Mm-hmm. One moment. Quiero dar un breve resumen sobre esta conversación que estamos teniendo sobre la identidad y la alternativa que es la autenticidad. Y Shawn está hablando de el hecho de que nosotros tenemos una parte de nosotros que quiere sabotear lo que nosotros estamos tratando de hacer, nuestra misión, por decirlo así. Y que una manera en que obra esa identidad, o sea, el sabotear, el que quiere sabotear, es darnos ideas de que estamos haciendo algo mal, que no lo estamos haciendo bien, o si no nos da, por ejemplo, el sentimiento que estamos cansados, que ya no queremos trabajar, o nos da también palabras críticas que hacemos a otras personas. Y ella dice la manera de lidiar con eso es de primero pararnos en lo que estamos haciendo, ver lo que estamos haciendo y luego escoger otro camino que no sea de autocrítica, de crítica de otros o de pensamientos o decir cosas negativas para poder dar una apertura a que otras cosas pueden emergir de esta conversación que estamos teniendo, que es identidad versus autenticidad. Okay, so good. So we've got this. This is quite exciting. The part that it's giving me joy. The part that's giving me joy is that I see a place, an opening, a possibility of not being on top of myself as a critic. um, and it's that would allow something as I look, Shawn, that would allow something to show up that normally has no opportunity, which would be maybe even some self love might be the first thing that would show up. And
Mhm.
another thing that I was thinking that might show up is I might actually fall in love with other people who are around me.
Very
Um, yeah, and I don't
wanna
know
know
what that would give me access
getting
to.
out of suffering?
Go ahead.
Here's the key to getting out of any suffering. Are you ready?
Hmm.
Stop making it all about you. When clients call me and they're suffering with something, the first thing I tell them to do is I tell them to find somebody within their little personal network that doesn't get heard and doesn't feel like they're part and connected, and to phone them up and stay on the phone with them until that person feels loved, connected, and heard. And you know something? The suffering just automatically disappears. Because the
I'm going
reason
to
why
ask you this. I'm going to ask you to say that once more because there's a question here came early in, and I'm going to bring it out now. The person was asking, "What is the pathway to fulfillment?" And I don't think fulfillment can exist in any space where you are suffering or the other person's suffering. So that's why I'm asking you to repeat this again. What is the access? If we didn't have suffering, following this conversation, if we weren't suffering, then we would not, we obviously would have access to something else that in this conversation is our authentic self, which is joyful and self expressive and maybe vital, full of energy and all of that. So
Yeah.
again, the question is, what is the pathway to eliminating suffering and enjoying the fulfillment that we all seek so much?
Well, the first thing that people have to remember is that if you're suffering, it's because you're making everything about you. So the key to disappearing suffering is to get out of your world and into the world of another person. And it doesn't have to take very long. 1 5-minute conversation on the phone would do it. As soon as you're in the world of another person, your identity is no longer making you suffer. And the more that you take on being in the world of another person, the faster the suffering disappears. So, like, I don't suffer longer than 10 minutes now. Because literally every 10 minutes, someone's asking me to relieve something, like to do something for them, right? Like, so literally my suffering has very short time spans.
So what in your case, or we can ask in your case or in my case that, or in anyone's case, let me put it that way. What is the source of what is the source of suffering?
The source of suffering is making everything all about us. Like
Why
having
would why would one do that?
well, because sometimes we do it because we can't see outside of our box. This is how we started this conversation, right? When we're stuck in our box, we can't see outside the box. So in order to get outside the box, we got to engage with other people. As long as you're only engaging with the voice in your head, it's not going to go well for you.
Hmm?
It's not.
Okay. Okay. So I'm asserting something now that when we're inside of our box, and oh no, I'm asserting this. Inside of our box is not a very comfortable place to be. Maybe there's suffering there all the time. As
Yeah.
long as it's okay. I was gonna
Let's
okay,
put it
great.
this way. Inside the box is like sitting on a fence post all the time. Not exactly comfortable. Fence posts weren't made for human butts. They just weren't.
Okay. Well, we're at a transition point here. So we're at 45 minutes in this conversation with Shawn Bearman. Would you mind again, Dan, putting up the slide that with her bio and contact information? So, and I can start while
We
you're
also
doing it. Night, Shawn. I think what we're going to do now is questions from the audience. You can help us with that, Dan, Jason, and
Well, one of the first questions that was given that I did answer, but I'll answer it again, was what's one mindset shift that helped me create more fulfillment in my life? And I'm going to say it's practicing the muscle, giving up that there's anything wrong. Right? When you can get really good at that muscles, right? Is practice giving up that there's anything wrong. There's only what works and what doesn't work. This whole conversation about right and wrong isn't even really relevant. There's it worked for me or it didn't work for me, and that's it. Everything else is just conversation. Noise. Like that white noise you listen to in the back end when you're like that black noise when the TVs used to go all fuzzy.
yes,
That
yes,
noise. Like that's the kind of noise it is. So that was one of the questions that we had.
yeah. And there was another one just up again.
Practice takes a heck of a lot of practice.
Well, a practice, and I would say also a commitment to something greater than the noise.
Yeah.
I think we get pretty comfortable. I know myself, pretty comfortable. You get a good game going. You got at least it's working out or it's enough for you to continue to survive. But then when
Yeah.
it comes to really going for the real thing, what you really have on your heart, your heartfelt desire, that's when, thanks to what you said tonight, all of these things will emerge, and that there's nothing wrong with their emerging. They're part of moving towards your heartfelt desire, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
this is really good information for
And
me
I'm
to
going to
have.
remind people that I said there was 3 red flags that tell you that you're in a disempowering conversation and the identity is trying to take over. Okay. That if you deal with them when it happens, you've got a chance of stopping the identity from taking over. One is a physical indicator. Okay. Mine is all my injuries start to throb, right? For some people, their chest gets tight. For some people like you, it's fatigue, right? It's different with each person, right? So it's a physical indicator. The second is a feeling indicator, right? Mine is I get annoyed. Some people get angry. Some people just get sad. They get sad about everything. Every time something happens, they're sad, right? Okay, it's a feeling indicator. And then the third one is a thought indicator. It's a term or a phrase that you often say, and you know that when you say it, you're going down what we call the dwindling spiral of doom, right? Where the identity takes over and starts driving the car called you.
Right. Feeling, thought, and then a physical. Could come
Physical.
from any of those.
Yeah.
So the obverse would be what would people, what would one have as indicators that one is on the path or on one's path? I know you touched on this earlier, but you want to speak about that in the same way you thought you spoke about disempowering?
Well, one of the indicators is contentment. We often think sometimes of contentment as being settling. But do you know that it's actually okay to be content with your life exactly the way it is? Right? that you don't have to be striving for something better, more, or different, right? Like we struggle so much to get more, better, different than what we already are without truly being grateful for where we are. I mean, let me ask you this question. Why the heck should the universe give you more if you're not grateful for what you already have? And so it's a slippery slope. So if you have a chance, if you're feeling joy, your job is to spread that, right? Is to give that away to as many of the people around you. Because I'm sorry, if your life is a 15 on a scale of 1 to 10, but the people you care about don't have at least as good a life as you, you're not done yet. And it's perfectly okay to live a content life. You don't have to always be striving and struggling and striving and struggling. But if you want something that's a bigger game, then you've got to be willing to do the work to get there. If your only game is to go from here to the fridge and get a bonbon and come back and watch TV on the couch, then that's not a very big game. You're going to win that one pretty easy, right? You're going to be able to keep your word pretty easy. But if you're creating a big honking game like you are, for example, of creating the tribe, right? Then you're going to run into more breakdowns. You're going to run into more curveballs. You're going to run into more disempowering conversations. And it really makes sense to learn how to deal with them powerfully, since you're a human being and you're going to have them. You can't help it.
I want to ask you to speak about pathways. You touched on, landmark worldwide, the landmark forums. Some of us have had the opportunity to participate in that, and there are other modalities, right? For
Lots of them, yeah.
so
I do a program called Reclaim Your Power, and it is all about teaching people what to do when they get disempowered, right? I have a friend who does this incredible program that teaches people how to be a response versus being a reaction, right? So it's just a matter of, I'm going to say this poorly, but it really doesn't freaking matter what you do as long as you do something. As long as you're doing something to develop yourself. I have a whole list that I send people to. So, for example, there was this one woman who was really suffering from generational trauma, right? Like her parents had been part of the Holocaust and she had been raised with their suffering, right? And so I sent her to do family constellation work. And I sent her to do work by Dr. Bradley Nelson called, the Emotion Code, because those are two things that I know that impact generational trauma. So my job is to find what is out of all the different cool stuff that I know out there, what's the thing that's going to have the biggest impact for you right now? And it just depends what the biggest breakdowns are that you're dealing with right now, right? Because different modalities will deal with those breakdowns in different ways.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's completely appropriate to send someone to a psychologist, right? Sometimes it is, right? Sometimes it's really appropriate to send them to, sometimes I can't work with them on their business until I send them to a relationship coach and they get their relationship sorted out because their partner doesn't support the business. Right? The point is what do you need, each and every one of you that's listening, what do you need to move forward? What is the biggest breakdown that you're dealing with? And then who do we have in all of our vast networks? Between all of us, we know thousands and thousands and thousands of people. So between all of us, we know the person that can make a difference for you. We just have to tell enough people. We just have to be willing to share.
Yeah. And I think that that's probably I think that's where we started, Shawn, that, this is growth is not possible for us to do it just ourselves inside our heads, thinking about how we're going to deal with things that we don't even know how to deal with, and trying to figure out. That's actually kind of insane, right? To start when you look at it, I don't know how to fix this, but I'm going to try to fix it myself, like that, rather than doing it in a community and sharing oneself and one's challenges, if you will, with other people who most likely some of them have had the same challenges and overcome them. And so you
Yeah.
could actually learn from them. And then I found something else interesting is that when I ask questions, appears sometimes just in the asking of the question, to someone else, I get some insight into what a possible answer might be for me. I was asking someone. This was a couple weeks ago. One of my guests, in fact, and this was off camera after we concluded the interview. And I was asking him, what was the source? What is it that kept you going? What gave you confidence in yourself? That's it. When things didn't look good, and you didn't think it was going to work out, and everyone was telling you it wasn't going to work out either. What gave you the confidence to keep going? And he gave me several answers that they were great answers, but they didn't resonate with me. And then I started to think. I said, "Oh, well, maybe I could look within and see what the answer is for me, not depending on someone else to give me an answer, but to look for
Right.
myself, right?"
Mhm.
And I came up with the answer that for me, it's always surprises me because I come back to this, Shawn. I always come back to a scripture that says, I can do all things through God who strengthens me. So there's something about God in there that's always present for me wherever I go. But more importantly, this kind of reliance on something that's greater than me. It's not about Michael figuring this whole thing out. There's some other thing that's, that I can tap, like that. And so I
Yeah.
was very, very excited to hear you talk about, taking this to brainstorm, talk to other people, see what they have to say, get their ideas, bring it back. And because we're all one, really, we
Well, and
have
the
this.
questions I tell people are 10 times more important than the answer.
Mm, mm, mm,
The questions we ask are always more important than anything we could tell somebody.
mm, mm,
Because
mm,
just in the asking of the question, we tell them who we are.
mm, 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 mm. Well, okay. So this is I love this particular interview. I think I'll be listening to it at least 2 or 3 times, and maybe more, because there's so much in here that some of it I'm listening. See, I'm talking to you, and so part of me is distracted from what you're saying.
Mhm.
And then I'm also listening to myself, and you can imagine how big distraction that is. But uh, is there something? What would you like to leave us with in parting?
I think I just want to leave you with you're enough exactly as you are. And if you get that, then becoming something, or causing something becomes a creation, right? You can't really create coming from there's something wrong with where you are and how you are and what's going on now.
Well, we've been honored to be in the presence of Shawn Bearman, master business coach, multi entrepreneur, and go to expert for creating radical results. We're going to put the easiest way, I think, to get in touch with Shawn is by her website, which is ineedacoaching.com. I'm sure there are other ways to get in touch with her. She has a network of coaches that are available to you to help you move towards your heartfelt goals. Thank you for being with us tonight, Shawn. I'm Michael Leslie, host of The Alchemy of Success, and I look forward to seeing you again next week. Thank you for coming Tuesday at 7 p.m. every week. Take care.
Thank you for watching the Alchemy of Success podcast. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. See you next week.